ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। नमः श्री शंकरानंद नमः श्री शंकरानंद गुरुपादाम्बुजन्मने गुरुपादाम्बुजन्मने सविलास महामोह सविलास महामोह ग्राहग्रासैक कर्मणे ग्राहग्रासैक कर्म। आभास ब्रह्मणि देहात् बहिर्यद्यद् यद्वद् विवेचिते तद्वदाभास कूटस्थौ विविच्येतां वपुष्यपि। Second verse 17. Dehat bahihi, outside the body, as in the case of an object such as a chair. Yatha abhasa brahmani yadvad vivechite. How we have shown the presence of twofold consciousness. How we have shown the presence of twofold consciousness with reference to external objects. One is the very consciousness that forms the substratum of an object, and other is the consciousness that illumines the object or makes it an object of our knowledge. So everything is supported by consciousness, everything is supported by existence, awareness, satchit asti bhati priyam, and therefore the intelligence is present everywhere in general. But an object only becomes an object of our knowledge only when that object is further illumined by the particular consciousness or particular intelligence that is reflected in the vritti, reflected in the thought form. So we saw the process as to how an object is known when the mind assumes the form of that object and the consciousness is reflected in that object. The reflected consciousness illumines that object, and that is how a given object becomes the object of our knowledge. It becomes an object of our consciousness, our knowledge, only when there is what we call chidabhasa or reflected consciousness. Thus evolve again, as it is illumined by the sunlight in general and the light reflected through a mirror, so also an object such as a chair is illumined by awareness or intelligence in general, which is the content of every object, which is the substratum of every object, plus illumined by what we call chidabhasa or the reflected consciousness in particular when it becomes an object of my knowledge. Thus with various arguments it has been shown that this twofold awareness obtains with reference to any external object that becomes the object of our knowledge. And all of this was shown. It is easy to see this with reference to external objects. It is easy to see the presence of this twofold awareness or consciousness and intelligence with reference to external objects. Now that we have understood this, now we would be able to understand also the presence of this twofold intelligence, a twofold consciousness within ourselves, meaning with reference to our mind also within our own self. Tadvad abhasa kutastha. In the same manner also, abhasa kutastha, there is chidabhasa and kutastha. Kutastha is the changeless awareness. Chidabhasa is the reflected awareness. Vapushyapi vivichedam. So may you distinguish between them, vapushyapi, within the body also. Just as we have seen how to distinguish between the twofold consciousness, illumining an external object, so also we should now be able to do the viveka or discriminate between the twofold consciousness obtaining within our own self. Because it is aviveka or a mixture or a non-discrimination of this twofold awareness alone, that is what creates a sense of what we call jiva or limitation. There is kutastha, the self, which is changeless. Then there is chidabhasa, the reflected consciousness reflected in the various thoughts in the mind. So as various thoughts arise in the mind, as we said, a thought is comparable to a mirror, and therefore it reflects consciousness. So we should know that that is Chidabhasa or reflected consciousness, and that is not the self. But since that my thought also appears to be conscious on account of the consciousness reflected in there, just as when the sun gets reflected in the mirror, then the mirror also gains the ability to illumine. You can receive the reflection of the sun, and with the help of the reflection you can illumine some other room. So how the mirror which receives the rays of the sun seems to as though gain the ability to illumine, so also the mind that receives the reflection of consciousness seems to gain the ability to illumine the objects, and therefore we take the mind to be the self. Whatever is conscious is naturally taken to be self by us. This body is conscious, therefore we take the body also as self, not realizing that the consciousness that the body enjoys is not its own consciousness, it is the reflected consciousness. So also the mind appears to be a conscious entity, therefore we take it to be the self, not realizing that the consciousness that the mind exhibits is not its own inherent consciousness, but it is reflected consciousness. Like the moon appears to be a shining and illumining object, all right. If we do not know that the moon enjoys the reflected light of the sun, we would think that the moon is self-effulgent. But what shines is not always self-effulgent. Something can shine in reflected light and still appear to be self-effulgent like moon. And similarly also, what is sentient is not necessarily Atma or the self, because the sentiency of the consciousness can be in what we call from the borrowed light or the reflected consciousness. And that is what it is. That this body enjoys twofold intelligence, the intelligence that is kutastha or the changeless intelligence, and it also enjoys what we call the reflected consciousness. And therefore, we have to learn to distinguish between the two, because by not distinguishing between them and by taking one to be the other, then there arises in us a sense of limitation, because when the body is taken to be Atma, then I am as limited as the body. When the reflection is taken to be the self, my face, then all the distortions of the reflection also become as though my distortions. And so also, all the limitations of the mind and the body, they become my limitations when I take them to be the self, and therefore the need to discriminate between them. In order that we can do that, is now the purpose of the subsequent verses from the verse 18. Before the verse 18, now a question arises. Nanu dehad bahihi chidabhasa vyapya ghatakara vrutti antar vishaya gochara vrutti abhavat katham tad vyapakas chidabhasa abhivagamyate. Now there is a certain difference between the arrangement that obtains with reference to outside objects and that which obtains with reference to some within our body. That the outside objects are inert. Inert means those which cannot reveal themselves. And therefore, those objects have to be illumined by the mind through the sense organs, and then alone the objects can present themselves to our consciousness, or the objects can be cognized. And therefore, with reference to the cognition of the outside objects, we say that there is an object, and there is a corresponding thought form which pervades the object, and then there is a reflected consciousness which illumines that object, and that is how the cognition takes place. Because the object is inert, and therefore a vritti is required, a thought is required, and reflected consciousness, chidabhasa, is required to illumine the object. Now within ourselves there are no objects such as a pot or a chair. So question is that it's all right that in the outside objects that there is an object and the vritti and the chidabhasa, but then inside there are no objects such as ghatapata, and therefore how do you say that? So antar vishaya gochara vrutti abhavat, when there are no objects such as the pot, chair and whatever inside, then naturally there should be no thoughts also inside. Question is, when does a thought take place? A thought takes place when the cognition takes place, he says. And cognition of an external object takes place. So therefore, there can be a thought pertaining to an external object. However, within ourselves there are no objects, and therefore, how can there be thoughts when there are no objects? So, antar vishaya gochar vritti abhavat, and when the vritti of the thought is not there, tad vyapaka chidabhasah katham abhivagamyate. Then how do you say that within ourselves also that there are thoughts and there is reflected awareness? Because the idea is that the thoughts can be there only when there is a corresponding object. Since within ourselves there are no objects, therefore, how do you say that there are thoughts within ourselves? This is the question. The answer is Vishaya Gochar Vritti Abhavepi Ahamadi Vritti Sadbhavat. He says, okay, inside we do not have the objects such as a pot or a chair or whatever. But there are what we call the Ahamadi Vritti Sadbhavat. There are thoughts inside pertaining to Aham or the I-ness. We have what we call Antahkaranam. So we have thoughts inside pertaining to Aham, I notion is there. Kama, Krodha, the anger, lust, happiness and happiness, all of these different thoughts are there. And there are no objects corresponding to them. Anger, for example, is a thought. Desire is a thought. Happiness is a thought. Unhappiness is a thought. Ego is a thought. So we are saying that inside all these thoughts are there, whether there are corresponding external objects or not. Even without the corresponding objects, the emotions can take place. So these are all emotions. Happiness, unhappiness, desire, anger, greed, all of these are different emotions and they do take place. And therefore, wherever a thought is, whether the thought is born as a result of cognition of an outside object or the thought is born by itself, all that is necessary for the consciousness to be reflected is the presence of a thought. And it doesn't matter whether the thought has a corresponding external object. So understand that when we have in our mind what we call ghatakara vritti or a patakara vritti, meaning the thought of the nature of a pot or a chair and such objects, then there is an object and the thought and reflected consciousness. But when we have thoughts such as an anger, or thoughts such as happiness, thoughts such as desire, for these thoughts there are no corresponding outside objects. But the thought arises, and when the thought arises, wherever the thought arises, the reflected consciousness or Chidabhasa will be there. And therefore we say that with reference to the thoughts pertaining to inner emotions also, Chidabhasa or reflected consciousness is. Vishaya Gochar Vritti Abhavepi. Even though there is an absence of a vritti or a thought form which has a Vishaya or an outside object as its locus, Ahamadi Vritti Sadbhavat. Since there is a presence of the vrittis of thoughts such as I and things centered upon I, tad vyapakaha chidabhasaha abhipagantum shakyate. And therefore, it is possible to accept the chidabhasa or reflected consciousness which gets reflected in these vrittis of thoughts. It is sadushtantamaha. This is being stated in the verse 18 with an illustration. Says the verse 18, Aham vrittau chidabhasah, aham vrittau chidabhasah, kama krodhadikasu cha, kama krodhadikasu cha, samvyapya vartate tapte, samvyapya vartate tapte, lohe vanniryatha tatha, lohe vanniryatha tatha. Aham vrittau kama krodhadikasu cha chidabhasah samvyapya vartate, yatha tapte lohe vanhi vartate. Yatha, just as tapte lohe vanhi samvyapya vartate. Just as when we have a hot iron ball or a hot iron piece, how the fire completely pervades that iron. So tapte lohe, in a red hot iron piece or an iron ball, let us say, how the fire completely pervades that iron. Similarly also, that means that wherever that fireball is, that fire must be. Fire is called Vyapaka and iron is Vyapya. Iron is that which is pervaded and fire is that which pervades. Fire pervades the iron. Fire is called Vyapaka, pervader. Iron is called Vyapyam, that which is pervaded. And so, where that iron is, the fire pervades. Similarly also we can give the illustration of a mirror. Where the mirror is, my face is going to be reflected. And similarly also, where the thought is, the consciousness is going to be reflected. It does not matter how the thought is originated. Whether thought is originated on account of an external object or thought is originated by other reason. I may be remembering something, or I may be reflecting upon something, or I may be feeling something. So all these different thoughts are there, what we call manaha, buddhihi, chittam, ahankaraha. Manaha means the various emotions are there. Buddhihi, various thoughts and ideas and cognitions are there. Chittam, the various reflections and remembrance is there. Ahankaraha, meaning the sense of ego is there. Kama, krodha, adhikasucha. Kama means desire, krodha, anger, all of these vrittis or thoughts are also there. So, when these thoughts are there in the mind, chidabhasaha samvyapya vartade. In all these various thoughts, the chidabhasa, or the reflected consciousness, obtains, pervading these vrittis or being reflected in the vrittis. Tapte lohe vannihi yatha, just as in the red hot iron ball, how the fire pervades, and so also in these vrittis of thoughts, the chidabhasa gets reflected. Ahamadi vrittinameva chidabhasavasyatvam drishtanta prapanchena spashtayati. Again, shows how these thoughts such as ego, desire, anger, and all these various thoughts occurring inside ourselves, within ourselves, how all these thoughts are illumined by chidabhasa or reflected consciousness. Drishtanta prapanchena spashtayati, that is clarified by a drishtanta or an illustration in the verse 19. Swamatram bhasayet taptam, swamatram bhasayet taptam, loham nanyat kadachana, loham nanyat kadachana, evamabhasa sahitaha, evamabhasa sahitaha, vrittayasvasvabhasika, vrittayasvasvabhasika. Swamatram is a nice illustration of a red hot iron piece. A thought is compared to a red hot iron piece. How the iron is pervaded by the fire, and so also the thought is pervaded by consciousness. Swamatram bhasayet taptam loham. And when you heat an iron piece or iron ball, it shines, it glows on its own. So it reveals itself, it illumines itself, or it glows. Na anyat kadachana. But that iron piece cannot illumine itself. That iron which is pervaded by fire and therefore which is hot, it shines or it manifests itself, it reveals itself. We can see that red hot iron ball, but that red hot iron piece cannot illumine anything else. So swamatram bhasayet, it just illumines itself, but that red hot iron does not illumine anything else. The fire can illumine something else, but the red hot iron does not illumine an object other than itself, it just illumines itself. Evam abhasa sahitaha vrittayah. And similarly also, the various thoughts occurring in the mind. Abhasa sahitaha, along with the consciousness that is reflected in them. Swasvabhasikaha, all those thoughts also, along with the reflected consciousness, reveal themselves. So these vrittis or the thoughts reveal themselves, they illumine themselves, meaning they are self-shining. Just as red iron piece is self-shining, and so also the thoughts occurring in the mind, on account of the consciousness reflected in them, they are also self-shining. They do not illumine anything else. One thought does not illumine another thought. It is a kutastha or the Atma that illumines all the thoughts, but one thought reveals itself. Like the iron piece shines, so also every thought on account of the reflected consciousness shines. That shows that because thought itself the mind, meaning the thoughts, are also inert. And therefore, thought also cannot reveal itself. But the inner mind or the inner thoughts reveal themselves. We are aware of the various thoughts taking place in our mind, good thoughts, bad thoughts, happy, unhappy. How? Because the thought shines. How do the inner thoughts shine? Because the thoughts reflect the consciousness and therefore they're as though sentient or as though conscious. How does the iron which is black, how can it shine in darkness? Because that iron is pervaded by fire and therefore it shines. So the dark iron also becomes shining on account of the blessing or the pervasion it has from the fire. And similarly also a thought form which is also inert nevertheless shines because it is blessed by or pervaded by the reflected consciousness. And therefore, all the thoughts are self-shining. That's the reason why we come to know the thoughts occurring in our mind. So thus, the fact that the thoughts shine, the fact that the thoughts illumine themselves, even though a thought by its nature is inert, and still it shines, that shows that there is reflected consciousness. Understand? The body, for example, is inert by itself, and still it is sentient. That shows that it receives the reflection of consciousness. The iron is black by itself and still shines. That shows that it has received the pervasion of fire. And similarly also the thoughts are inert because they are also made up of 5 subtle elements and therefore they are also inert and still they shine. That shows that there is a reflected consciousness. And thus the case of Chidabhasa or the reflected consciousness is made here. That there is an entity called Chidabhasa or the reflected consciousness, and wherever the thought is, there the consciousness gets reflected, and that is how the thought shines. Okay, so shown by reasoning how there is a Chidabhasa or the reflected consciousness. Evam Chidabhasam Vyutpadya. And thus by the reasoning it has been shown that there is an entity called Chidabhasa or reflected consciousness reflected in the thoughts. Kutastha Swarupam Vyutpadayadum. Now the author also shows that there is another awareness also, which is Kutastha or the witnessed consciousness. So there is an awareness that is reflected in the thoughts, and there is another awareness which is of the nature of witness, which is changeless and which illumines the thought and the reflected consciousness both. So illumining them both is what we call Kutastha or the self-consciousness or the witness consciousness. Now wants to show by reasoning that there is also what we call the witness consciousness. In order to show that, tad upayoginam vrityavhasa avasaram darshayati. To show what happens is, when too many lights are present, then we do not know what is the original light. There is a dialogue in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad where the teacher Yajnavalkya wants to show how everything is illumined by self or everything is illumined by Atma. For that, there is a nice dialogue which leads the student to see this fact. Then the student Janaka asks the teacher Yajnavalkya, "Oh revered sir, what is it in the light of which a person performs all the, what is it in the light of which a person performs all his transactions? That he remains in his home, goes out, performs his work and comes back. In which light does a person do all this?" Then the sage Yajnavalkya says, "In the light of the sun." Then Janaka says, "That's fine. But what happens when the sun is set? When the sun is set, then in the light of which does a man go out and perform his actions and come back?" Then Yajnavalkya says, "In the light of moon." Says, "Fine, that is also right. But when the moon also sets, because moon doesn't remain, doesn't shine for the whole night. There are days when the moon rises and then again sets. So when moon also sets, then what is the light by which the man remains in the home, goes out, performs his work and comes back?" Says, "In light of fire, torch." At that time he uses a torch. Says, "Right, okay. But now we are in a pitch dark situation, the torch is there, suppose the torch also gets extinguished. Then in which light does a man performs his work? How does he go from one place to another? He says, by the light of speech. How when there is utter darkness, then you don't see anything. At that time when someone ahead of you says, come away, come along in this direction, then by the sound we are guided. And that is how we can find our path. So the sage Yajnavalkya says that even in the absence of the sun and in the absence of the fire or the torch light, then it is the speech that illumines the path of this person. Then Janaka asks further, all right, but even when the speech also becomes quiet, then who illumines? And when does the speech become also quiet, silent? In the dream. So, all right, when this person goes to sleep and he is dreaming, at that time there is no sun because sun is set, sun doesn't have an entry into our dream, moon does not have an entry in our dream, fire also does not have an entry in our dream, even our speech also does not have an entry in our dream, and therefore all the conventional sources of light which illumine our day-to-day transactions, all those conventional sources of light are absent in the dream state. And still we find that in the dream also a man is in the home, he goes out, he does his things and comes back. In which light, in whose light does a man perform all these transactions in dream? Then Sage Yajnavalkya says, it is in the light of the self that he does that. So illustration of dream is given to show that it is the light of the self by which everything shines. That could have been said even about the waking state. In the waking state also, it is only the light of Atma, the self alone, that everything shines. But that may not be very clear because there are too many sources of light. Sun also is there, moon also is there, fire also is there. So we may think that these are the sources of light or these are the luminous bodies which illumine our life. But in reality, what illumines everything is nothing but the self. But the dream example is given because in dream, these conventional sources of illumination are not there, and therefore the student can easily see that yes, in the dream, in what light, in the light of which do we do all these things? In the light of the self. Here also, now the author shows some conditions where this Chidabhasa or reflected consciousness is absent. Again, going back to the illustration of the wall, we are saying that where do you see the general light? Between the patches of reflected light. So wall is illumined by the sunlight, all right. Wall also is illumined by several circular patches of reflected light. In between these two patches, you can see the general light. Or when the mirrors are all turned away, then you can see what we call the general light that illumines the wall. And similarly also, when we consider the states where this Chidabhasa or the reflected consciousness is not there, then what obtains there is purely Kutastha or the changeless consciousness, the general consciousness. And therefore, in order to show or in order to make us see that there is Kutastha or this witness consciousness, changeless witness consciousness is also there over and above the Chidabhasa or the reflected consciousness, tad upayoginam vrutyabhasa avasaram darshayati. First of all, in the verse 28, the author shows how certain states of experiences are there where there is no vritti or no thought. That's first shown here. Says the 28th verse. Kramad vichchidya jayante vrittayo khilaha sarva api viliyante supti murcha samadhishu. Kramad vichchidya jayante vritteh akhilaha. Akhilaha vritteh, all the various thoughts which arise in our mind, vichchidya jayante kramad, they arise in sequence. Interesting thing is, the various thoughts arise in our mind, they arise one after the other. You cannot have two thoughts together. In the mind, at a given time, there can be only one thought. When one thought is gone, then the other thought comes. When that is gone, then the third thought comes. These thoughts arise one after the other, and when we say that now happy thought, unhappy thought, good thought, bad thought, so various thoughts are arising. This following thought is different from the preceding thought. When can it be? Only when the first thought is complete and the second thought arises. There must be a gap between the two thoughts. When the first thought is complete and the second thought is arising, between them there must be a gap. Otherwise, the second thought cannot be separate from the first thought. So, kramad vichchidya jayante vritteha akhilaha. All these various thoughts arise one after the other in sequence, and therefore, between the two thoughts there is a space. However infinitesimal that space is, there must be some space between the two thoughts, because thoughts arise one after the other. So when the first thought has gone away, second thought has not yet occurred, there must be a small gap. Our thoughts are running so fast that generally we are not aware of that gap. Our thoughts are racing. Looks like one thought is riding over the other thought, and therefore we don't seem to see the distance between the thoughts, but there has to be. And when the mind has become quiet, then perhaps you can see that the one thought is gone and the other thought arises. That there is a space or a gap between the thoughts. And what obtains between the thoughts? Something must be there. So, here in this verse, the author shows those states where the thoughts are not. Where the thought is, the reflected consciousness must be. Where the thought is not, the reflected consciousness also cannot be. Where the mirror is, my face can be reflected. Where the mirror is not, the face is not reflected. So also where the thought is, the consciousness or kutastha is reflected. When the thought is not, it is not reflected. So absence of thought is also absence of reflected consciousness. Just as absence of mirror means also absence of reflection, and so also absence of vritti or the thought also means absence of chidabhasa, because chidabhasa or the reflected consciousness cannot be unless the thought is. So we want to here see what are those states where the thought is not. First is, between the two thoughts, the thought is not, naturally. In order that the second thought is distinguished from the first thought, there must be a small gap between the two thoughts where the thought is absent and where therefore chidabhasa or the reflected consciousness also is absent. Sarvaha api viliyante. And in all this series of thoughts also viliyante, they completely get resolved, or they completely stop, or completely get merged, I should say. All these thoughts get merged completely. So supti murcha samadhishu. Supti in the state of deep sleep. Murcha when you are unconscious, swooning. Samadhi when the mind is totally in samadhi or absorption. So these are certain states. Deep sleep, there is no thought. At least we are not aware of it. Or murcha, when you are unconscious, then also there is no thought. And when one is in so-called samadhi or in the state of absorption, then also there is no thought. That alone is called the state of samadhi, when all the thoughts have stopped. So between the two thoughts, there is no thought, therefore no chidabhasa. In the deep sleep, when there is no thought, again there is no chidabhasa. In samadhi, there is no thought, therefore there is no chidabhasa. In a state of murcha or unconsciousness or faint or swoon also, there is no thought, therefore there is no chidabhasa. So these are some of the conditions where chidabhasa or the reflected consciousness is absent, because there is no thought at that time. Okay. Bhavatu evam, let it be so. Let it be so that these are the states where there are no thoughts, all the thoughts are merged. Bhavatu evam samadhyado vritti vilaya. Yes, we accept that all the thoughts are merged in states such as deep sleep, samadhi, etc. Anena katham kutastha avagamyate. By that, how do you say that kutastha or the changeless awareness is? Just because thoughts are not there, how do you say that? Or the chidabhasa is not there, how do you say that kutastha or the self or the consciousness is, witness consciousness is, how do you say? Iti ashankya vritti abhava sakshittvena asau agamyate. Says we know that there is kutastha or the consciousness there also. How do we know? Vritti abhava sakshittvena. As sakshi or the witness of vritti abhava, absence of thought. So there is a witness of the absence of thoughts also. Just as there is a witness of the presence of thoughts. And as the parade of the thought takes place, there is a witness who is aware of all these thoughts. Similarly also in the deep sleep when there is no thought, there also there is witness. That's why when we wake up in the morning we say, I did not know anything. Or when one becomes unconscious, then also the witness is there. That's why when we again wake up from that state of unconsciousness, we say, I did not know anything. And therefore, we say that the consciousness or kutastha or chaitanya, the self is that which eliminates both the presence of thoughts in the waking and the dream states and absence of thoughts or chidabhasa in the deep sleep state. So witness is the illuminator or the witness of both. Kutastha is the witness of both presence and absence of thoughts. Vritti abhava sakshitvena asau avagamyate. We say that the kutastha is a sakshi or witness of vritti abhava or the absence of thoughts. And that is said in the verse 21. Sandhayo khila vrittinam abhavaschavabhasitah nirvikarena yenasau kutastha iti chocyate. Sandhaya akhila vrittinam. Sandhi means a meeting place. So where the two thoughts meet, where do the two thoughts meet? In a space between the two thoughts. Akhila vrittinam sandhaya, in the meeting places of the thoughts. So thought meets in what we call in a space where there is absence of thought. So meeting place between the two thoughts is a place where there is no thought or absence of thought. So vritti sandhaya and akhila vrittinam abhavascha. So in the waking state, in the dream state, when the thoughts are parading, then also between the two thoughts, which is called the sandhi or the joining point of the two thoughts, that there is no chidabhasa because there is no thought. And vrittinam abhavascha, and the state of deep sleep and swooning, etc., where there is no thought again, there also there is no chidabhasa. But then, still those states are known to us. You cannot say that you are totally, nobody is dead in the deep sleep state. And we don't even say that I am unconscious in deep sleep state in that sense. There is no consciousness in deep sleep state. In deep sleep state also, there is consciousness. There is a witness consciousness. What is the witness? It witnesses absence of all the thoughts. This will be nicely stated in the 10th chapter, which is known as the Nataka Deepa Prakaranam, or the chapter which means Nataka. Nataka means a stage or a drama. So how the lamp on the stage illumines all the activities on the stage. And when the performance is over, and then when the dancer and all the spectators and all the musicians, all of them have gone away, then also that lamp illumines absence of everything. It illumines empty theatre. Similarly also in the waking and the dream state, our mind is playing all kinds of drama. And this drama is going on in the waking and dream state, then it is a witness consciousness which is like a lamp, illumines everything. In the deep sleep state, when all the performers have gone away, all spectators have gone away, in deep sleep state there is no one. That is comparable to the vacant empty theatre. And just as the lamp illumines empty theatre, the kutastha, the witness, illumines what we call the absence of all the thoughts in the deep sleep state. So there also the witness consciousness is very much present. Then how come we do not know anything in the deep sleep state? Because the means of knowledge, namely the mind, is not present there. As we said, we can know the objects only when the mind contacts the objects. In the deep sleep state, there is no mind, and therefore objects cannot be contacted, and therefore there is no cognition of any objects in the deep sleep state. There is no cognition of any kind. In that state, the witness consciousness still shines in its own light, eliminating the absence of everything. And therefore the point is that space between the thoughts, as well as the absence of thoughts such as in deep sleep, who illumines it? At that time there is no thought, there is no chidabhasa of the reflected consciousness also, then who is it in the light of which is the state of deep sleep illumined? And the light in whose light is the space between the two chidabhasas is illumined. That is what we call kutastha, or the changeless consciousness. Sah kutastha avagantavya yena nirvikarena avabhasitaha asau kutastha iti uchyate. And that kutastha must be nirvikara or changeless. Because the witness must be changeless, and then alone all the changes can be eliminated. So the thoughts are constantly changing. These changing thoughts are eliminated by the one who is changeless, that awareness that is changeless. So changeless awareness eliminates all the thoughts. It is with reference to the changeless awareness that we are aware of all the changes. And therefore, the changing thoughts are all illuminated by the awareness that must be changeless. And also, that illuminator must be conscious or intelligent entity, because intelligence alone is self-shining. So kutastha must be chaitanyam, it must be conscious as well as it must be changeless. Therefore the changeless consciousness, which is a witness of the absence of all the thoughts, is that which illumines the absence. So changeless witness consciousness illumines the thoughts when they are present, and also illumines the states when the thoughts are absent. So therefore, we can see here that there is this entity of the principle called kutastha, or the changeless witness consciousness, and that we can very clearly see when the chidabhasa or the reflections are not there. Just as an illustration that we just gave, it is easy to see how the dream state is illuminated by the self, because there are no conventional lights there, and so also how the absence of thoughts is illuminated, because the thought is not there and still it is illuminated. Therefore, we have to accept the presence of what we call the witness. Evam chasati kim phalitam, all right. So there is kutastha or the changeless awareness. If this is so, kim phalitam, so what does it mean? Or what is it to be? What is it that you are driving at? Or what is it that we should understand from this discussion? So that is stated in the verse 22. घटे द्विगुण चैतन्यम यथा बाह्ये तथान्तरे वृत्तिष्वभिततस्तत्र वैषद्यं संधितोऽधिकम् घटे द्विगुण चैतन्यम यथा बाह्ये घटे द्विगुण चैतन्यम यथा, just as बाह्ये घटे, in the part which is an external object, द्विगुण चैतन्यम, how twofold chaitanyam of the consciousness obtains with reference to a outside part, which we discussed earlier. How the part is illuminated in general by the consciousness that is Brahman, and how the part is again illuminated in particular by Chidabhasa, the reflected consciousness. Tatha antare, similarly also inside, vrittishu api, in the thoughts also, tataha, vrittishu api, in the thoughts also, there is this twofold consciousness. Bahye ghate, यथा घटमात्र अवभासकः चिदाभासः घटस्य ज्ञातता अवभासकं ब्रह्म चैतन्यं च इति चैतन्यद्वैगुण्यम्. Just as in case of an external object such as a pot, there is a chidabhasa which illumines the pot, and there is Brahma or the general consciousness, intelligence, pure intelligence, which illumines even that knowledge of the pot. It is Chaitanya Dvaigunyam. Thus we have these two expressions of Chaitanya or intelligence with reference to the outside objects that are known to us. Tatha antare, similarly also inside, ahankaradi vrittishu api, in such thoughts as aham, meaning the ego thoughts, kama, krodha, lobha, desire, anger, happiness, unhappiness, and all these various thoughts also. Kutastha chaitanyam vrityavhasakah chidabhasaschaidi. There is kutastha chaitanyam, or that changeless consciousness, the witness consciousness, which illumines the thoughts and the reflections. Vrityavhasakah chidabhasaschaidi. And then also there is what we call the reflected consciousness, chidabhasa, which illumines the thought. So thought is illumined because the chidabhasa, the reflected consciousness. And even the reflected consciousness also is witnessed by what we call the kutastha or the witness consciousness. So inside also two expressions of consciousness is. What is the first expression? The self or the witness consciousness. What is the second expression? The consciousness that is reflected in the thoughts, which is called chidabhasa. Iti dviguna chaitanyam asti. And that is how there is this twofold consciousness within ourselves also. And it is so important to be able to distinguish between them. That the chidabhasa, the reflected consciousness, is a consciousness reflected in thoughts, and I am not that. That is the object of my knowledge. There is drishyam or something that is known to me, and who am I? I am the kutastha or the witness consciousness. Tatah tatra vaishadyam sandhitah adhikam. Tatah tatra, and therefore wherever the thoughts are, vaishadyam adhikam, then there is greater clarity. Sandhitah adhikam vaishadyam. With reference to the place where there are no thoughts, there is a greater clarity of consciousness where there are thoughts. Again, just as in a wall, when the wall is illumined by the light in general, well, there is certain clarity. But when a reflection falls on that wall, that particular place is even more clear, is more shining. And so also, inside the kutastha is shining all right, but when a thought occurs, and when the consciousness is reflected in the thought, there is consciousness even more clear. That's the reason why we miss the presence of kutastha. We miss the presence of the witness consciousness because it is not that clear. While we definitely make note of what we call chidabhasa or the reflected consciousness, because the thoughts reflect the consciousness, is very clear. In the wall also, how that patch of reflected light is immediately noted by us, but the general light perhaps we may miss. And here also the author points our attention that even when the reflected consciousness is, that other witness consciousness is also present. Yatah dviguna chaitanyam asti. Since this twofold awareness is there inside, tatah, therefore, sandhitah, sandhibhyah, with compared to the sandhi or the space between the thoughts, tatra vrittishu vaishadyam adhikam drishyate. Where the thoughts are, the consciousness is more shining or more clear because there are threefold light, the general consciousness and reflected consciousness. Okay, I think so far we'll go today. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krutau Vande भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः। हरिः ॐ।